The tribunal chamber was vast beyond measure. The ceiling rose so high above them that it disappeared into shadows. Pillars of dark metal stretched upward like the trunks of ancient trees. The floor beneath their feet was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the countless lights that burned overhead. Around the edges of the chamber, hundreds of Vorath officials sat in tiered seating, watching the center floor where the human delegation now stood. Ji-won kept his expression calm as he surveyed the room. This was meant to overwhelm them. Everything about this space was designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. The size, the lighting, the arrangement of seats that placed all eyes on the center platform. It was psychological warfare conducted through architecture. At the far end of the chamber, raised on a platform that required 30 steps to reach, sat the Emperor. Even from this distance, Ji-won could see he was different from other Vorath, larger, more commanding. His robes were deep crimson, almost black, and seemed to move of their own accord. His face was ancient, marked with lines that suggested centuries of existence. His eyes glowed with a faint inner light. Beside the Emperor sat 7 other figures. The High Council, Ji-won guessed. Each wore robes of different colors, each bearing symbols of authority and power. They watched the humans with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. "Kneel before the Emperor," Commander Tavik ordered from behind them. Ji-won didn't move. Neither did his team. The silence stretched for several long seconds. "You were commanded to kneel," Tavik repeated, his voice hardening. "We heard the command," Ji-won replied, still facing forward. "We are representatives of humanity. We do not kneel to anyone. We stand as equals, or we do not stand at all." A murmur ran through the assembled Vorath officials. Some sounded angry. Others seemed amused. On the platform above, one of the council members leaned forward as if to speak, but the Emperor raised one hand. The chamber fell silent. "Let them stand," the Emperor said. His voice carried across the vast space without effort, deep and resonant. "I am curious to see if their pride survives the next hour." He gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the air above the center of the chamber. It showed the Sol system with Earth highlighted in blue. Around it, red markers indicated the positions of Vorath warships. "You call your world Earth," the Emperor continued. "A simple name. Appropriate for a simple people. You have 1 planet, 3 small colonies on nearby moons, and approximately 9 billion individuals. Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are laughable. Your civilization is barely 8,000 years old. Do you dispute any of these facts?" "No," Ji-won answered. "Those facts are accurate. Then you understand the situation. You have nothing we want except your obedience. Surrender your world to the Empire. Accept our rule. In exchange, we will allow your species to continue existing. This is more generous than most primitive worlds receive." Ji-won clasped his hands behind his back. "May I ask a question, Emperor?" "You may. When your scouts first entered our system, they must have detected our satellites and space stations. They saw our cities from orbit. They observed our technology. What conclusion did they reach about us?" One of the council members answered before the Emperor could speak. She was thin and severe, with robes of deep purple. "They concluded you were typical. Another young species just beginning to explore space. Slightly more advanced than most we encounter, but nothing remarkable. Why does this matter?" "Because your scouts were looking for the wrong things," Ji-won said carefully. "They saw what we are now. They didn't investigate what we were before." The Emperor leaned forward slightly. "Explain." Ji-won gestured to Yunji, who opened the secure case and removed a small data device. She handed it to Ji-won, who held it up for all to see. "This contains information that I believe will interest the Council. With your permission, I'd like to connect it to your holographic system." The Emperor studied him for a long moment, then nodded to one of his attendants. A Vorath technician approached, took the device from Ji-won, and inserted it into a control panel. The holographic display shifted and changed. A star map appeared showing hundreds of systems across the galaxy. Many of them were marked with Vorath symbols, indicating they were part of the Empire, but scattered among them were other markers, different symbols that none of the Vorath seemed to recognize. "What are we looking at?" the purple-robed council member demanded. "These are locations we've identified through archaeological research over the past 200 years, Ji-won explained. "Each marker represents a site where we've found ruins, very old ruins, structures and technology that predate any civilization currently active in this galaxy. There are ancient ruins on many worlds. another council member said dismissively. He was broad and muscular, wearing robes of dark green. This proves nothing. These aren't just any ruins, Jiwan continued. They all share common characteristics, similar architectural styles, compatible technology standards, and most importantly, genetic markers that match human DNA. The chamber erupted in noise. Vorath officials shouted questions and objections. The council members leaned together, speaking rapidly in voices too low to hear. Commander Tavik stepped forward, his hand moving to his weapon. The Emperor raised his hand again, demanding silence. This is a lie, a desperate deception. Humans are primitives. Your recorded history barely spans 8,000 years. You have no deep space capability. You've never traveled beyond your own system. That's correct, Jiwan agreed. The current human civilization hasn't. But we aren't the first human civilization. We're the second. The holographic display changed again. This time it showed images of ruins on dozens of different worlds. Massive structures carved from stone and metal. Devices of unknown purpose lying half-buried in alien soil. And everywhere inscriptions in a language that looked almost, but not quite, like modern human writing. 23,000 years ago, Jiwan said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. The first human civilization spanned this galaxy. They built cities on thousands of worlds. They developed technology that we still don't fully understand. They were mighty and powerful and proud. Then where are they? The purple-robed council member challenged. If this ancient civilization was so powerful, why did it fall? Why are you primitives instead of masters of the galaxy? War, Jiwan answered simply. A civil war that lasted for centuries. The details are lost to time, but the evidence suggests it was catastrophic. Entire star systems were destroyed. Worlds were rendered uninhabitable. By the time it ended, almost nothing remained. A small group of survivors fled to an isolated system at the edge of the galaxy. They settled on a planet they called Earth. They abandoned their old technology because it had brought them nothing but destruction. They started over, choosing to be simple rather than powerful. This is fantasy, the muscular council member growled. Even if these ruins exist, even if they show signs of human genetics, it doesn't mean what you claim. Perhaps humans were slaves of the ancient builders. Perhaps you're descendants of servants, not masters. Jiwan smiled. I thought you might say that. That's why we brought this. The holographic display changed one final time. Now it showed a close-up image of an inscription found on a ruin in Vorath space. The symbols were ancient and worn but still visible. The Vorath writing on the image indicated it had been discovered on a Vorath mining colony 70 years ago and dismissed as meaningless decoration. This inscription has been in your possession for decades, Jiwan said. Your scholars couldn't read it, we can. It's written in Proto-Human, the language spoken by the first civilization. Would you like to know what it says? The Emperor stared at the inscription with an unreadable expression. Tell us. It's a warning, Jiwan said softly. It says, here we stood. Here we built. Here we thrived. Let any who come after remember that this place belonged to the children of Earth. Let them know that we chose peace over power, but we never forgot how to fight. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Every eye was on the ancient inscription, on the words that had been ignored for 70 years. The colony where this was found, Jiwan continued, is in the Kelthera system, one of your major military bases. You've had this warning posted on your own doorstep for nearly a century, and you never knew what it meant. The Emperor stood. The movement was sudden enough that it caused every Vorath in the chamber to tense. He descended the 30 steps slowly, his eyes never leaving Jiwan's face. When he reached the floor, he walked across the polished surface until he stood directly in front of the human ambassador. You're claiming that we, the Vorath Empire, have been building our civilization on the ruins of yours. Not claiming, Jiwan corrected gently, stating a fact that can be verified. Your empire is 12,000 years old. The ruins are 23,000 years old. You rose after we fell. You built on what we left behind. Even if this is true, the Emperor said, his voice dangerous and low, it changes nothing. Your ancient ancestors are dust. You are here now, weak and helpless. Whether you were once mighty is irrelevant. Is it? Jiwan asked. You said your scouts concluded we were typical. But we're not typical. We're the descendants of the most advanced civilization this galaxy has ever known. The small Earth vessel moved through the darkness of space like a silver needle against black cloth. Inside the ship, Ambassador Jiwan stood at the observation window and watched the massive structure ahead grow larger with each passing second. The Vorath flagship was enormous, easily 100 times the size of the human diplomatic craft. Its dark metal surface seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Jiwan wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. He was a tall man with calm eyes and steady hands. Behind him, 3 other humans worked at their stations. Hyun sat at the navigation console, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. Minho monitored the communication systems, his face lit by the soft glow of multiple screens. Yoonji stood near the rear of the cabin, holding a secure case that contained all their official documents and credentials. "They're sending another message," Minho announced without looking away from his screens. "Same as before. They want us to follow their guidance beam directly to their docking bay." Jiwan nodded slowly. "Acknowledge their message. Tell them we're complying with their instructions." The Vorath had appeared in Earth's solar system 3 weeks ago. Their arrival had been sudden and overwhelming. One moment, the space around Earth was empty. The next moment, dozens of massive warships materialized near Mars. They had sent a simple message to Earth. The Sol system now belonged to the Vorath Empire, and humanity was expected to submit to imperial authority. The governments of Earth had been thrown into chaos. Some wanted to fight, others argued for negotiation. In the end, the decision was made to send a diplomatic mission. Jiwan had been chosen to lead it. He was known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind. If anyone could navigate this dangerous situation, it was him. "We're approaching the docking bay," Hyun reported. Her voice was steady, but Jiwan could see the tension in her shoulders. She was young, barely 30 years old, and this was her first major mission. The bay doors are opening. The massive doors of the flagship split apart like the jaws of some great beast. Lights flickered on inside, illuminating a cavernous space filled with smaller ships and complex machinery. Their small vessel glided forward, guided by tractor beams that took control of their movement. Jiwan felt a slight vibration through the floor as the beams locked onto their hull. "I don't like this," Yoonji muttered. She was the security officer, responsible for protecting the diplomatic team. "We're completely at their mercy now." "We were at their mercy the moment they arrived in our system," Jiwan replied quietly. "This changes nothing. Stay focused on our mission." The ship settled onto a landing platform with a soft thump. Through the windows, they could see Vorath soldiers moving into position around their vessel. The soldiers were tall and broad, covered in dark armor that seemed to blend with the shadows. Their faces were hidden behind helmets with glowing red visors. "At least 50 soldiers out there," Yoonji observed, her hand resting on the secure case. "Heavy weapons. Energy shields. They're not taking any chances with us." Minho's console chimed. "Incoming message. They're requesting we exit the ship and proceed to the reception area. They say an escort is waiting for us." Jiwan turned away from the window and faced his team. "This is it. Remember what we discussed. Stay calm, show no fear. We represent all of humanity in this moment. Everything we say and do will be analyzed and judged." Hyun stood up from her station. "Do you really think we can negotiate with them?" "They don't seem interested in talking." "Everyone is interested in talking," Jiwan said. "Even conquerors. They could have destroyed Earth without warning. They could have ignored us completely. But they didn't. They sent us an invitation. That means something." The airlock hissed open. Cool air rushed into the cabin, carrying strange scents that none of them could identify. Jiwan stepped forward first, descending the ramp onto the deck of the alien flagship. His team followed close behind. The Vorath soldiers stood in perfect formation, their weapons held at attention. One figure stepped forward from their ranks. Unlike the soldiers, this Vorath wore no helmet. His face was angular and sharp, with skin that had a faint blue tint. His eyes were large and completely black like pools of ink. He wore elaborate robes marked with symbols that probably indicated high rank. "I am Commander Tavik," the Vorath said. His voice was surprisingly smooth, translated instantly by the communication devices both species wore. "I will escort you to the tribunal chamber. The Emperor wishes to see you immediately." "We're honored by the Emperor's attention," Jiwan replied, keeping his voice neutral. "I am Ambassador Jiwan of Earth. These are my colleagues. We come in peace, seeking dialogue and understanding." Tavik's expression didn't change. "Follow me. Do not deviate from the designated path. Do not touch anything. Do not speak to anyone except when directly addressed." The commander turned and began walking without waiting for a response. The human delegation exchanged glances, then followed. Soldiers fell into step around them, forming a moving cage of armored bodies and weapons. They walked through long corridors lined with technology that seemed both ancient and impossibly advanced. Strange lights pulsed in the walls. Odd sounds echoed from hidden spaces. Other Vorath passed them in the corridors, stopping to stare at the humans with undisguised curiosity. Some of their expressions seemed hostile, others looked merely indifferent. "How long has your empire existed?" Jiwan asked Tavik's back. The commander didn't slow his pace. "The Vorath Empire has ruled this galaxy for 12,000 standard years. We have conquered 3,000 star systems. We have subjugated 200 primitive species. Your kind will be the 201st. Impressive longevity," Jiwan commented. Behind him, he heard Yunji shift the secure case from one hand to the other. "And in all those 12,000 years, you've never encountered humans before?" "Your world was not marked in any of our charts," Tavik said. "You exist in an isolated region of space. If you had been worth finding, we would have found you sooner." They entered a massive lift that carried them upward through the ship. The walls of the lift were transparent, offering views of the ship's interior. Jiwan saw vast chambers filled with machinery, living quarters stacked like cells in a hive, training areas where soldiers practiced combat maneuvers. The scale was staggering. Millions of beings must live aboard this single vessel. "Tell me, Commander," Jiwan said softly, "when your people explore a new star system, do you study its history? Do you investigate the planets you claim?" Tavik finally looked back at them. His black eyes reflected the lift's lights. "We study what is useful: resources, strategic value, potential resistance. History is irrelevant. The past is dead. Only the present matters." Jiwan smiled slightly. "I see, that's very practical." The lift stopped. The doors opened onto a corridor that was clearly designed to intimidate. The walls were decorated with weapons from countless conquered worlds. Banners hung from the ceiling, each one marked with symbols of defeated civilizations. At the end of the corridor, enormous double doors stood closed, guarded by 10 soldiers in armor more elaborate than the others. "Beyond those doors is the tribunal chamber," Tavik announced. "The Emperor waits inside with the High Council. You will show proper respect. You will answer all questions truthfully. You will accept the judgment of the Empire without protest. Do you understand?" Jiwan looked at the commander directly. "We understand what you expect. Whether we can deliver it remains to be seen." Tavik's eyes narrowed. "You are either very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both," Jiwan replied. "Shall we proceed?" The commander gestured to the guards. The massive doors began to open with a deep rumbling sound. Light spilled out from the chamber beyond, bright and harsh. Jiwan took a deep breath and stepped forward. His team followed. Behind them, the doors closed with a sound like thunder. The tribunal awaited. "We may have forgotten much, but memory returns. Knowledge surfaces. And some things were, for a moment that seemed to stretch forever. Nothing happened." The Emperor stared at the small black cube in Jiwan's hand. The council members watched from their elevated seats. The assembled Vorath officials barely dared to breathe. Commander Tavik moved his hand to his weapon but didn't draw it. Then alarms began to sound. They started quietly, distant warning tones echoing from somewhere deep in the flagship. But within seconds they grew louder and more insistent. Emergency lights began flashing along the walls of the tribunal chamber. The holographic displays flickered and changed without anyone touching the controls, showing system alerts and security warnings. A Vorath officer rushed into the chamber, her armor scorched and her face pale. She ran directly to the Emperor, not even acknowledging the presence of the human delegation. "Your Majesty," she gasped, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the fleet. Unknown systems are activating. They're not responding to our commands. They're not even in our networks, but somehow they're interfacing with our technology." "What systems?" the Emperor demanded. "What are you talking about?" Before the officer could answer, the main holographic display in the center of the chamber changed again. This time it showed the space around the Vorath flagship. The view was cluttered with dozens of their warships, all holding position in formation. But now, among those ships, other objects were appearing. They looked like asteroids at first, dark and irregular. But as they emerged from stealth, their true nature became clear. They were satellites, hundreds of them. Ancient constructions that had been floating in space for millennia, disguised as natural debris. Now they were powering up, their surfaces glowing with lines of light and patterns that looked disturbingly organic. "We're detecting the same phenomenon across the entire fleet," another officer reported, his voice transmitted through the chamber's communication system. "These satellites are everywhere. They've been here all along. They're surrounding us." The purple-robed council member shot to her feet. "Destroy them. Fire on those satellites immediately." "We've tried," the officer replied. "Our weapons systems are experiencing interference. Half our ships can't even lock onto the targets. The others are reporting that their weapons refuse to fire, as if something is overriding our commands." Ji-won stood calmly in the center of the chaos, still holding the black cube. The Emperor turned to face him, and for the first time Ji-won saw something in those glowing eyes that looked like fear. "What have you done?" the Emperor asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I've activated a network that has existed since before your empire was born," Ji-won answered. "When the first human civilization fell, they knew they were dying. But they also knew that someday, their descendants might need protection. So they built failsafes, security systems hidden in places where no one would look, automated defenses that would remain dormant until activated by someone carrying the genetic markers of the original humans." He gestured to the holographic display showing the satellites. "These aren't weapons, not yet. They're communication nodes, sensor arrays, and control hubs. They've been here all along, watching and waiting. Your ships have been passing them for thousands of years, never knowing what they were. If they're not weapons," the muscular council member growled, "then what threat do they pose?" "They're connected to other things," Ji-won said simply. "Things that are weapons. Things that are still sleeping but can be awakened. Our ancestors were very careful. They didn't want to create something that could destroy the galaxy again, so they built systems that would only activate under specific circumstances, systems that require authorization from someone like me." The chamber's main entrance opened and more officers rushed in. They moved directly to the council platform, speaking urgently with the Emperor and his advisors. Ji-won couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could read their body language. Panic, confusion, fear. Hyun moved closer to Ji-won, her voice low. "Did you know this would happen?" "We suspected," Ji-won admitted quietly. "Our scientists said the key would activate dormant networks if brought near them. But we didn't know the scale until now. We didn't realize how much our ancestors left behind." "This is madness," Yoonji muttered. She kept her hand on her sidearm, though Ji-won doubted it would do much good if things turned violent. "We're going to start a war." "We didn't start anything," Ji-won replied. "The Vorath came to our system with warships. They demanded our surrender. All we're doing is showing them that they made incorrect assumptions." Minho was watching his portable communication device, his eyes wide. "I'm picking up transmissions from across the galaxy. Multiple Vorath colonies are reporting the same phenomena. Ancient satellites activating. Unknown energy signatures appearing. They're calling it a system-wide emergency." The Emperor descended from the platform again, this time with all 7 council members following him. They formed a semicircle around the human delegation, their faces showing various degrees of anger and alarm. "You will deactivate those systems immediately," the Emperor commanded. His voice carried absolute authority, the kind of voice accustomed to instant obedience. Ji-won met his gaze without flinching. "No. You dare refuse an order from the Emperor of the Vorath?" "I dare," Ji-won said calmly. "Because I'm not your subject. Neither is my world. Neither are my people. You came to Earth believing you could simply claim it as your own. You thought we were primitives who would accept conquest without question. But now you know the truth. We are the heirs of the civilization that existed before yours. These systems, these networks, these ancient defenses that are now awakening, they all belong to us. They recognize our genetic signature. They respond to our commands. And they will not tolerate threats against their creator's descendants." The purple-robed council member stepped forward. "Your ancestors are dead. You cannot claim ownership of ruins that fell before your civilization even existed. By any reasonable law, salvage rights belong to those who discover and occupy abandoned territories." "Is that what you tell all the species you conquer?" Ji-won asked. "That their homes aren't really theirs because you decided to occupy them? That's not law. That's theft with bureaucratic justification." "Enough philosophy," the muscular council member interrupted. "Let's speak practically. You've activated some old satellites. They've caused some alarm, but they haven't actually done anything. They're not attacking. They're not threatening. They're just there, glowing in the darkness. This is theater, not power. Jiwan smiled slightly. You're right. They haven't done anything yet, but they could. Would you like a demonstration? No, the Emperor said sharply. Whatever you're planning, do not do it. I'm not planning anything, Jiwan assured him. I'm simply offering to show you the full capabilities of these systems. You seem doubtful that they pose any real threat. I thought you might want to see what they can do before you make any decisions about how to proceed. The council members exchanged glances. The Emperor studied Jiwan's face, clearly trying to determine if this was a bluff. Finally, he nodded. A small demonstration. Nothing that will cause permanent damage. And if you do anything that we perceive as an attack, my soldiers will kill you where you stand. Do you understand? Perfectly, Jiwan replied. He turned his attention to the black cube in his hand. His fingers moved across its surface in a specific pattern. The lights dancing across it changed color, shifting from blue to amber. In the holographic display, one of the ancient satellites near the flagship began to glow brighter. Energy built up along its surface, crackling like lightning. The Vorath officers monitoring the situation began shouting reports, their voices urgent. It's targeting our shields. Energy spike detected. Brace for impact. A beam of pure white light shot from the satellite. It struck the flagship's shield system with such force that the entire vessel shuddered. Alarms blared. The lights in the tribunal chamber flickered. But the shield held. Our shields dropped to 60% capacity in one shot, an officer reported over the communication system. That satellite is outputting energy levels equivalent to our main weapons array. And there are hundreds of them around your fleet, Jiwan added quietly. That was one satellite using maybe 10% of its capacity, firing once. Imagine all of them firing simultaneously at full power. How long would your shields last? The muscular council member's face had gone darker, a sign of deep anger in Vorath physiology. You're threatening us. No, Jiwan corrected. I'm educating you. You came to Earth thinking you understood the situation. You thought you were dealing with a primitive species that would roll over and accept conquest. But you were wrong. You're not invaders claiming new territory. You're trespassers in a house where the original owners never actually left. Your ancestors abandoned this galaxy, the Emperor said, his voice hard. They chose to hide on Earth. They gave up their claims when they gave up their power. They gave up their aggression, Jiwan replied. They chose peace over conquest. But choosing peace doesn't mean surrendering the right to defend yourself. It doesn't mean letting others take what's yours. Our ancestors didn't abandon the galaxy. They left markers. They left systems. They left warnings. And they left the means for their descent. The tribunal chamber had descended into controlled chaos. Council members argued with each other in raised voices. Military officers rushed in and out, delivering reports that grew more alarming with each passing minute. The Emperor stood motionless in the center of it all, staring at the holographic map that showed his empire dotted with ancient human installations. Jiwan and his team remained where they were, surrounded by increasingly nervous soldiers. Commander Tavik had drawn his weapon now, though he kept it pointed at the floor. His expression suggested he was waiting for any excuse to use it. Status report, the Emperor commanded, cutting through the noise. Everyone fell silent. The purple-robed council member stepped forward, holding a data tablet. Your Majesty, the situation is developing rapidly. We're receiving reports from 347 colonies across the Empire. All of them have detected the activation of previously unknown systems in their vicinity. Some are on the surface of planets. Others are in orbit. Still others appear to be hidden within asteroid fields or debris zones. Are they attacking? The Emperor asked. No, they're simply activating and transmitting identification signals. They appear to be communicating with each other, forming some kind of network. Can we shut them down? We've tried. Nothing works. They're operating on frequencies and principles our scientists don't understand. It's technology that predates our entire scientific knowledge base. The muscular council member moved forward, his face dark with anger. Then we destroy them, launch a coordinated strike across the Empire, eliminate every one of these installations before they can do anything else. That's thousands of targets. Another council member objected, this one wearing robes of deep blue. It would require mobilizing the entire Imperial fleet, and even then we have no guarantee our weapons would be effective against technology this advanced. We have to try. No, the Emperor said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we act. Attacking these installations might trigger exactly the response we're trying to avoid. He turned to face Jiwon directly. You said these systems can be awakened. Does that mean they're sleeping right now? Not fully active? That's correct, Jiwon replied. Right now they're in what we call recognition mode. They're identifying themselves to each other and to me. They're confirming that someone with the proper authority has activated the master key, but they're not operational. Not yet. And if they become fully operational, what happens then? Jiwon considered his words carefully. That depends on what we tell them to do. These systems were designed to be defensive, not offensive. But the line between defense and offense can be thin. A shield can become a weapon if used properly. One of the council members, an elderly Vorath with robes of silver, spoke for the first time. His voice was scratchy but intelligent. You speak of these systems as if they're alive. As if they can think and make decisions. In a way they can, Jiwon confirmed. Our ancestors built artificial intelligence into many of their creations. Not consciousness, but something close to it. The ability to adapt, learn, and respond to changing circumstances without constant input from their creators. These systems have been dormant for 23,000 years, but they haven't been dead. They've been waiting. Waiting for what? The elderly council member asked. For us. For humans. For the descendants of the people who built them. The systems are programmed to recognize human genetic markers and respond to commands from individuals who carry those markers. I carry them. So does every person on Earth. We're the authorized users of technology that exists throughout your empire. The Emperor began to pace, his crimson robes flowing behind him. You've made your point, Ambassador. You've demonstrated that you have access to ancient systems that we didn't know existed. You've shown that you could potentially threaten our empire. But threats cut both ways. Your planet is surrounded by my warships. Your people are defenseless. If I give the order, Earth could be destroyed before these ancient systems could react to save it. That's true, Jiwon acknowledged. You could kill everyone on Earth, but then what? These systems are activated now. They're connected to this key. If I die without properly shutting them down, they'll interpret that as a hostile act. Their programming will assume that the descendants of their creators have been eliminated by hostile forces, and they'll respond accordingly. You're bluffing, am I? Are you willing to bet your empire on that assumption? The Emperor stopped pacing. He stared at Jiwon with an expression that mixed respect and hatred in equal measure. You've trapped us. Every move we make could trigger a catastrophic response. Not trapped, Jiwon corrected gently. We've given you a choice. That's different. You can choose to accept that Earth is not yours to claim. You can choose to withdraw your ships from our system. You can choose to acknowledge our right to exist independently, or you can choose to fight. But if you choose to fight, you need to understand what you're fighting against. Explain, the Emperor commanded. Jiwon manipulated the black cube again. The holographic display shifted, zooming in on one of the glowing points in Vorath space. It showed a barren moon orbiting a gas giant in a system called Harvax Prime, one of the Vorath's major industrial centers. This is typical of what we're dealing with, Jiwon explained. That moon looks dead and useless. Your people have ignored it for centuries, but beneath its surface there's a construction facility built by the first human civilization. It's been dormant since the fall, but it's still functional. Still capable of producing ships, weapons, and defensive systems using automated processes that require no human oversight. That's impossible, the muscular council member protested. Nothing could remain functional for 23,000 years. Human technology from that era was designed to last, Jiwon replied. Self-repairing, self-maintaining, built to survive millennia without intervention. Your technology breaks down after centuries. Ours was meant to endure until the end of time itself. He manipulated the cube again. The holographic display showed another location, this time on an inhabited Vorath world. The planet was called Thera, one of their oldest colonies. Here's another example. Thera has been a Vorath world for 10,000 years. You've built cities, factories, military bases, but 3 miles beneath your capital city, there's a power generator built by the first humans. It's been providing supplemental energy to your entire grid without you realizing it. Your engineers probably think they're amazingly efficient. In reality, they've been drawing on ancient human technology that they don't even know exists. Heon leaned close to Jiwon and whispered, "How do you know all this? I thought we only had fragmentary information about the old installations." "We did," Ji-won whispered back. But when I activated the key, it connected me to the network. I'm receiving data from all over the galaxy. The systems are talking to me, telling me where they are and what they do. It's overwhelming. The Emperor must have overheard because he moved closer, his eyes narrowing. You're saying you're in communication with these systems right now? Yes. Then command them to deactivate. Shut them down. Prove that you have control. Ji-won shook his head. I can't do that. Can't or won't? Both. The systems are designed to resist deactivation once they've been awakened. That's a safety feature. Our ancestors didn't want their enemies to be able to shut down defenses simply by capturing someone with the right genetic codes. The systems will only fully deactivate after they've determined that the threat to their creator's descendants has passed. Then how do we end this? The Emperor demanded. You end the threat, Ji-won said simply. You withdraw your warships from Earth. You acknowledge our sovereignty. You agree to leave us alone. Once your ships are gone and the systems confirm that Earth is safe, they'll begin returning to dormant status. The process will take time, maybe weeks or months, but eventually they'll sleep again. Until then, they remain awake and watchful. The blue-robed council member stepped forward. You're asking us to surrender to a primitive world, to accept humiliation in front of the entire galaxy. The Empire does not submit to threats. I'm not asking you to surrender, Ji-won countered. I'm asking you to recognize a mistake. You thought Earth was an easy conquest. You thought we were helpless. You were wrong. Now you have the opportunity to correct that error without bloodshed. Isn't that preferable to war? War we might win, the muscular council member growled. Might, Ji-won agreed, or might not. These systems have been evaluating your military capabilities since they activated. They've analyzed your ships, your weapons, your tactics. They've concluded that in a direct conflict you would lose. Not quickly, not easily. But eventually, inevitably, you would lose. Is pride worth that price? An officer burst into the chamber, his armor scorched and his breathing labored. Your Majesty, the installation on Harvax Prime is active. It's begun producing something. We're detecting massive energy draws and material extraction. Whatever it's building, it's doing it fast. The Emperor turned back to Ji-won. Stop it. Command that facility to halt production immediately. I can't, Ji-won said. The systems are autonomous. They're designed to respond to threats. Your warships near Earth constitute a threat. The installation is producing defensive assets to counter that threat. I don't have the authority. The Emperor stood motionless for what felt like an eternity. Around him, the tribunal chamber remained frozen in tension. Council members waited for guidance. Officers held their positions, hands near weapons but not drawing them. The assembled Vorath officials watched from their tiered seats, barely breathing. Finally, the Emperor spoke. His voice was quiet, controlled, but filled with barely suppressed fury. You've backed us into a corner, Ambassador. You must know that trapped animals are dangerous. So are animals defending their homes, Ji-won replied evenly. The elderly council member in silver robes moved closer, his ancient face thoughtful. May I speak, Your Majesty? The Emperor gestured his permission. I've studied the data we've collected, the elderly Vorath said, his scratchy voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I've examined the images of these ruins, analyzed the genetic markers, reviewed the historical evidence. As much as it pains me to admit it, the humans' claims appear legitimate. These installations are genuine. They predate our empire, and they do respond to human genetic signatures. What are you suggesting? The purple-robed council member demanded. I'm suggesting we consider the possibility that we've made a grave error in judgment. We assumed Earth was an easy target because we only looked at their current capabilities. We failed to investigate their history. We failed to search for evidence of past civilizations. That failure has brought us to this moment. We can still destroy Earth, the muscular council member insisted. One strike, one overwhelming attack before these systems can fully activate. We eliminate the humans and the systems will have no one to protect. They'll eventually shut down. Or they'll go into revenge mode, Ji-won interjected. The systems are programmed with multiple response protocols. If they detect the extinction of their creator's descendants, especially through hostile action, they'll interpret that as requiring retaliation. Every Vorath world with an ancient installation beneath it will become a target. The systems will activate every weapon, every defensive grid, every destructive capability they possess. And they'll use them. You can't know that, the muscular council member challenged. Actually, I can. I'm connected to the network, remember? I can feel the system's decision-making processes. They're not simple machines following rigid programming. They're sophisticated artificial intelligences that can evaluate situations and adapt their responses. Right now, they're in protective mode because they sense a threat to humanity. If that threat eliminates humanity, they'll switch to elimination mode. And they'll pursue that goal until either the Vorath Empire ceases to exist or they run out of resources to continue. The blue-robed council member shook his head. This is madness. Absolute madness. We're the Vorath Empire. We've conquered 3,000 systems. We've subjugated 200 species. We don't negotiate with primitives, and we certainly don't retreat because of ancient machines. Perhaps that's why you've never encountered anything like this before, Jiwan suggested. You've been fortunate. You've conquered species that were truly primitive, that had no hidden advantages that couldn't surprise you. But Earth is different. We're not what we appear to be. And your standard approach of overwhelming force doesn't work when facing an enemy that has already surrounded you. Commander Tavik, who had been silent throughout most of the exchange, finally spoke. Your Majesty, with respect, we need to consider the practical realities. These installations exist throughout our territory. If even 10% of them are weaponized and activate simultaneously, our defenses would be overwhelmed. Our military is powerful, but it's not designed to fight on 3,000 fronts at once. The Emperor turned to his commander, his expression unreadable. Are you suggesting we surrender? I'm suggesting we recognize when conditions have changed. We entered the Sol system expecting an easy conquest. That expectation has proven false. Continuing on the original course would be foolish. Retreat is not in our nature. Neither is extinction, Your Majesty. The Emperor closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, he looked directly at Jiwan. If we withdraw from your system, what guarantees do we have that these installations won't attack us anyway? What's to stop you from using them as weapons of conquest once we've shown weakness? You have my word, Jiwan said. The word of one human means nothing. Then you have the word of the systems themselves, Jiwan replied. They're designed to defend, not conquer. Their programming doesn't allow offensive operations except in direct response to threats against their creators' descendants. As long as you leave Earth alone, the systems will leave you alone. They'll return to dormancy and wait for the next time they're needed. And if we want to expand in the future, if we discover other worlds in your region of space, then we negotiate like civilized beings. We establish diplomatic relations. We create treaties that respect both our interests. We treat each other as equals rather than conquerors and victims. The purple-robed council member laughed bitterly. Equals. You're one world with primitive technology. We're an empire spanning thousands of systems. How are we equals? Because we have access to technology that makes your empire's weapons look like stone tools, Jiwan answered. Because we're the descendants of the civilization that built the foundation your empire stands on. Because we can activate systems you didn't know existed and couldn't defend against if you tried. That makes us equals, not in numbers or territory, but in capability. And capability is what matters. The Emperor began to pace again, his hands clasped behind his back. The entire chamber watched him, waiting for his decision. Minutes passed in heavy silence. Finally, he stopped and turned to face his council. I am the Emperor of the Vorath. I have ruled for 600 years. In that time, I have never retreated from a weaker opponent. I have never acknowledged defeat at the hands of a primitive species. I have built this empire into the greatest force in the galaxy. He paused and Jiwan tensed, preparing for the worst. But I am also not a fool, the Emperor continued. Pride without wisdom is the path to destruction. Commander Tavik is correct. Conditions have changed. We entered this situation with incomplete information and false assumptions. Continuing on that basis would be stupidity, not strength. He turned to Jiwan. The Vorath Empire will withdraw from the Sol system. Our ships will depart within the next standard day. We will recognize Earth's sovereignty and establish formal diplomatic relations. We will not interfere with your world or your species without invitation. Relief flooded through Jiwan, but he kept his expression neutral. On behalf of humanity, I accept these terms. However, the Emperor added, his voice hardening, understand this clearly. We are withdrawing because tactical conditions make it the smart choice. Not because we fear you, not because we acknowledge your superiority. We are making a strategic decision based on new information. If circumstances change, if you prove to be a threat to the Empire, we will respond with the full force of our military might. Are we understood? Perfectly, Jiwan replied. And you should understand this as well. Humanity doesn't want war. We never have. Our ancestors chose peace over power. We would prefer to choose the same. But if you threaten our home again, if you attack our people, we will use every tool at our disposal to defend ourselves. The systems that are awakening now are only the beginning. There are others deeper and more powerful, still sleeping. We would prefer to leave them that way. Whether we can depends on you. The Emperor studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We understand each other. He turned to his council. Make the necessary arrangements. All ships in the Sol system are to withdraw immediately. Establish a diplomatic channel with Earth's government, and send orders throughout the Empire. All ancient installations are to be left undisturbed until we better understand their nature and purpose. Anyone who attempts to damage or destroy these sites without authorization will be court-martialed. The council members bowed and began issuing orders through their communication devices. Officers rushed from the chamber to implement the Emperor's commands. Within minutes, the organized chaos began to transform into purposeful action. Commander Tavik approached Jiwan. His expression was still hard, but something in his eyes had changed. Your ship will be escorted back to the docking bay. You'll be provided with safe passage out of the fleet and back to your world. Thank you, Commander, Jiwan said. Don't thank me. I still think we should have destroyed you the moment you revealed those systems. But I follow orders and the Emperor has spoken. You're a good soldier, Jiwan observed. Your loyalty to your Emperor is admirable. And you're a dangerous diplomat, Tavik replied. You came onto this ship with nothing but information and left with everything you wanted. That's more impressive than any military victory. He gestured toward the chamber's exit. This way. As Jiwan and his team walked through the corridors of the flagship, heading back to their ship, they passed Vorath soldiers and crew members who stared at them with mixed expressions of anger, fear, and grudging respect. News of what had happened in the tribunal chamber was spreading quickly. When they reached their vessel, Yunji let out a long breath. I can't believe that worked.